I don't know. It's very hard to say because I just feel like at any point in my musical life, I draw on the musical experiences I've had so far. So having gone there, like I haven't seen this in several years, so it was sort of a rediscovery for me to sit here and watch it. But everything that's in there, I think, does come out in my playing. So, you know, sometimes it's a little bit, and you think of yourself as a musical like pot of stew, and you arrive at who you are by all the influences that mix up, and you just keep ladling them in. And they're all in there in uneven amounts, and then when you need to go, you know, get creative, you just throw your hand in there and you pull out something. And it could be anything. It could be something from Africa. It could be something from Earl Scruggs. It could be something from Chick Corea. It could be something from Abigail. So I think as a musician, I kind of like the idea of not being super conscious about it, sort of letting things happen. I don't ever go, well, I'm going to try to write a reggae tune, or I'm going to try and write an African tune. But I love it when those rhythms and those tonalities and like the different modes that I learned over there show up in other kinds of music that I do. Hi.
Oh, hi. So then do you think that when the original banjos or what were near banjos, then they, so when the slaves came to the United States,
Yeah.
then do you think that they made something similar to that, and then there were copies made, and then that's how we sort of got the idea that, you know, it was started in Appalachia or wherever.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you
Exactly.
think
That's
happened?
exactly what I believe happened, what seems to be historical fact. But the only part that's funny is hearing them talk about it. I think they've kind of romanticized it to a certain point. Hearing the Gambians talk about it, about how they, the slave takers would take musicians intentionally because more of the cargo would survive if there was some music on the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that I can't verify that. It's possible, but and it also always seems strange to me, the idea people said the Africans brought their banjos with them. I was like, do you, when you take a slave, do you say, hey, what do you want to bring? I don't think you do.
Yeah,
So it's always struck me that they must have come here and built something that was as close to what they had at home as possible, and that's what became the banjo. And yes, that's exactly what happened on the plantations. They played this music. It was they didn't like drums. The slaveholders didn't like drums because they were afraid of the communication between slaves and possibly rebellions and things like that. But the banjo wasn't threatening because it was soft, and so they were allowed to play that instrument. And gradually, I think they noticed that, boy, they were having a good time over in that part of the plantation. They started checking it out and listening, and people would come and listen and go, wow, that's really cool. And then eventually some white guys started like going and trying to figure out how to play. And eventually this whole banjo thing got going where people would often wear blackface and play music of the plantation, kind of like singing about how great it is on the plantation, which was obviously very offensive later on, but at the time it was the music of the day, and it became very popular. It was called minstrel music, and then over the next while, the banjo became the most popular instrument in the United States and really probably the Americas. For a long time, like in the late 1800s, it was the way the guitar is now. Everybody had a banjo. People played all kinds of music on it. They played light classical music. Women always had them in the parlor. You know, you couldn't have a piano that easily, but everybody could have a banjo, so all kinds of music was played on it. The first big recording stars in the United States, the Banjo Kings, were these guys that, because when they were first making these recordings, it seemed like the banjo recorded well, because it was sort of abrasive and loud and strong, and they felt like they could mic it and record it. So some of the first recordings made were of banjo players, and there was this very virtuosic way of playing, both the three-finger style, these old styles, but also this stuff that I guess you would say predates ragtime. Very fast, intricate playing, but with fingers, like I do, like Earl Scruggs does. But way before Earl Scruggs was supposed to have invented the three-finger style. So there's all kinds of, I mean, I could go on and on about all this stuff, but the interesting part about it is that, well, there's lots of interesting things about it, but when jazz music started and Louis Armstrong was putting together his first band, he had a banjo in it, you know, because banjo was in the early Louis Armstrong groups and in the early part of jazz. But as soon as there became an alternative, as soon as the guitar came in, I wonder, well, why didn't banjo stay in jazz? it was because of that connotation, because of the minstrel guys, because of the blackface. And so when they had an opportunity to get rid of that old thing, as they called it, to them it signified slavery. It brought back all that stuff, you know, where the trumpet and all the other instruments that they played in jazz didn't. So so banjo kind of got excised from jazz, but then a little while later, it cropped up. Earl Scruggs came along with his fancy three-finger picking, where he revolutionized the folk music that was being played on the banjo and made it into this new virtuoso turn. And it led to a lot of people from the 40s on taking his style and growing it in a new direction, which led to people like me playing jazz on the banjo, but with the Scruggs style as my basis rather than the early jazz. So long answer, but that's the basic story of how the banjo came up and where it is now. Even there's lots of branches that get cut off and didn't continue, but the Scruggs branch has, old time banjo has. Tenor banjo is kind of a going away pretty much. It's not popular like it was. The strum banjo, there isn't as much of that anymore. Anybody else? Yeah, hi.
Looking in retrospect, how do you think you and your music impacted the individuals and communities you visited on your journey? And also, since then, have you witnessed much of like a cross-cultural music exchange continue in that same manner, or did you just continue on that? That would be interesting.
Yeah, well, thanks. So the first part of the question again was...
I mean, how do you think you and your music...
How did I affect them?
Affect them, yeah.
To start with that? Well, it depended on them, like which them. Like I'm still friends with Haruna, the first gentleman that I met in Uganda, and he came over recently, and we got back together, and he's very much a person of the world. He understood everything that was happening. There was other people where I was just some guy coming into play, and we played their song, and then they went back to their life. There were some people who were like real royalty-oriented, were like, I'm getting ripped off, you know, that kind of thing. There were other people who were like, there was all kinds of personalities. I mean, this was just part of the people that I worked with are in the film, because we couldn't get everybody in. There were some people who were very upset that they weren't in the final cut. You know what I mean? All kinds of things. And then there were the musicians that I was able to bring over on tour, which was a good number of them. I had 3 different tours where we went around the country in a bus and played shows with these guys. And in those situations, we had a lot more of a chance to get to know each other musically, because we were together for a long period. Like in almost every case here, I was with the person for a couple of days at the most, and then we went on to the next place. So we didn't have time for a really deep interaction. I had to really work fast. And a lot of times they didn't change that much that they did, but some of them could. Like Baseku, the Ngoni player, or Jelamati, people like that, they would respond to me and play based on what I was playing. Other people just did their thing and enjoyed hearing somebody doing something different with it. So I did about 60 shows with Tumani Diabate, the kora player, who actually isn't in the film but is on the record. And yeah, I've stayed in touch. I did a whole bunch of touring with Umu Sangare in Europe with her electric band, her rock African band. So I don't know, you wish for a lot of impact back and forth, but it's hard to quantify. But as far as fusions between the different countries, they've been going on since long before I came around, and they've been happening since this. That's like, for instance, the Sekou Kouyaté, the Ngoni player, and Jelamati did a tour with Cuban musicians a couple of years ago, which was really a cool thing. So it happens, and it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for everybody. Yeah.
Had you written any of your own pieces before going out, or did you wait to see like what each different musician brought before you?
Did I write any pieces before I went? Yeah. The only piece that actually 2. There were 2. One is that "Throw Down Your Heart" thing that we were playing at the end. And I wrote it at the airport on the way. I had a layover in Amsterdam, and I just got up my banjo and it just sort of fell out. And I was looking for somebody to play the tune with, and I could never seem to find anybody through the first 3 countries. And then when I got to Mali, and I heard musicians that I thought would make it sound good, and then we did it. And then there was a piece that I wrote to play with Anania that you hear when we're walking and we're talking about Anania's love life and the cops and all that kind of stuff. You hear it in the background where we're just jamming. It was just a little instrumental. Maybe a few little bits and pieces, but I wasn't really going over there to try and get people to play my music. I kind of wanted to soak things up. I thought it would be really hard to get people to play the stuff I write, and so that wasn't really what it was about, the trip was about. Yeah.
From the film, I noticed that music is a big part of the cultures, as you showed it in the film.
Yeah.
Is it true for the whole culture, or just the places you went?
I would say
What was your perception?
we specifically went to the places where it was on, where it was happening, because that was what we were trying to do. There's a lot of places where it's not like that, even right around where we were, where a lot of people wouldn't be that tuned into it. So just like here, you know, if you want to go to Louisiana, you won't find Cajun music everywhere, but you can find it. You know where to go. You know, to go to Lafayette, or you can go to New Orleans, or if you're looking for bluegrass, you know, or old time music, you know, North Carolina's a real good bed, and you know the places to go. So so we went to those places, and we searched out particular musicians that we were after. But you did find that within those families.
It did seem to show that there was a healthiness to the culture too.
Yeah.
The people that express themselves through music seem to be happy people.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, people always show their best side when they're being filmed. I mean, you hope, but my observation was that when you got around a family that was musical, it was really fun to see them teaching their kids and passing it along. And there's a lot of that in Africa. There's a lot of dad does this, the son's going to do this, and it goes on for generations and generations. And yeah.
How much did you know about the music and the culture of each place that you went before you went there, and how much planning did it take?
How much did I know before I went, and how much planning did it take? There's a lot of planning. Now, my brother Sasha, who was born when I was 17, right before I left home, was the director, and so he did a lot of work on logistics and stuff like that. But he also directed the film, and so he was the one who set up interviews with people before I got there and did them. And always he would never let me meet anybody till the cameras were set up, because we would capture these moments when I walk in the room. I'd be like out in the car for like an hour. I'm like, I want to go in and play with these guys. It's like, no, wait, we got to get everything set up. So he had. I'm looking at the film again and realizing how many great things he did to make it happen. But he did a lot of the sort of crap work that had to be done once we built the concept. But then I did a lot of the searching out of musicians, and I got all the music I could find from the countries we had figured out we were going to go to, and picked out some people, found some people. And Anania, the blind thumb piano player, I mean, I was going through all of these CDs of live shows, and I just found like a minute of him playing on this radio show, and someone just sort of interviewed him, and I said, that's him, that's the guy I want. You know, I'm not looking for this rock stuff, this sort of pop. I'm looking for that's what I want. And so I took a real sleuthing to find him, and then when I found him, he was like the gold mine. That was exactly what I was hoping to find, is somebody like that, some people like that to play with. I was also excited about the idea of like playing with the women who were cooking for us in Uganda, in Nakaseni. Like, I love that kind of stuff where it's just like women singing traditional songs like that, and I was hoping something like that would happen, but I didn't even know they were singers till I'd been there for a few days, and then it was like, wow, we should do something, and that was a favorite of mine too. But I couldn't prepare for that. You know, that was just something that happened. So a lot of the thing, I look back, I'm usually a preparer. I like to work really hard on music, and a lot of what I had to do in here was like just relax and let it happen. Of course, I got Final Cut, so if I sucked, I didn't have to put that out, right? So I did have control, but it was the illusion of giving it up to the muse, and a lot of great things happened. There was plenty of stuff, and there's another hour of footage of really good musical moments that could have easily gone in the film too. And it was about 30 days, so it was about 30 pieces. We averaged a piece a day that was of releasable quality. We put out 2 CDs from it. Both of them won Grammys. So it was a really amazing trip. Although it was very stressful for me, because like every day I had to like go meet new people, learn the music, and like record it on film. No overdubs. And then as soon as I got done, the next day, where am I going tomorrow? Oh no, I'm playing with Jelamati tomorrow. It was like, it wasn't a relaxing trip.
So tell me the music, did you, I saw a few scenes of you like writing out the tablature on
Yeah.
your computer.
Yeah.
And then you would go, you would have a few hours a day by yourself practicing, and then you
Right.
would go back and.
Like sometimes we'd go meet the people, we jam, we capture that on film, then we talk about some different, I get them to play some tunes for me, I go, oh, I like that one. I'd record it on my little thing, and then write it out in banjo tablature. I just had the computer with me, but I had no way to print anything off of it, so I just, there's a couple scenes where I'm messing around with. Maybe I organized some things in there and then wrote it out by hand once I'd done all the editing, figuring it out. But some of those melodies were just not memorizable, they were just too alien to me, but then, so you can see me sort of looking out of frame that there's a piece of paper on the floor or something, sometimes I would tape it to a stake or something just out of sight, so it wouldn't be, but you can see I'm reading it, only in a couple of places, but there's a lot of places where I just had to freewheel, and I like the combination of those, looking back. Did anybody who's been holding back, hey, yeah, hi.
There's some great camera angles in the film, those were really cool, the close-up shots and everything. And then my question is, did you come home with any of their instruments?
Yeah, I came home with an Ngoni, and that accounting that they were building was supposed to come to me, but it still hasn't shown up. I still hope it's going to turn up one day. It's on the slow boat.
I was gonna
Yeah.
say, that's what was so fascinating, is that in each village that they make their own instruments.
Yeah.
You know, like we buy instruments, don't really understand quite how they're made or what goes
Right.
into them, but they knew how to make all those instruments.
Yeah, they make their own instruments, and and the instruments are temporary. They're not made for life. They're not, they can go make another one in 3 or 4 years. It's like,
Mhm.
so that's kind of cool
Yeah.
to see. Yeah.
But your banjo looked gorgeous compared to what they had. Was that intimidating to them at all, or?
I don't know. I wanted to bring, it felt like a momentous trip to me, so I wanted to bring a banjo like the ones I play, which are these very expensive Gibson flathead master tones from the 30s that are worth, I guess around that time they were worth about $80,000. I couldn't bring myself to bring my main banjo that is, because I just didn't know what was going to happen if I get taken off of a flight or disappear or we'd get robbed, or there was a lot of, I mean, maybe thinking back about it, like in Uganda where we were 100 miles away, there was battles going on. In the Gambia, same thing. 40 or 50 miles away from where we were, there was violence. In Mali, where we were, I wouldn't go back to Mali now, with what's been going on. So there was a lot of, I kind of feel like we got in and we got out and nobody got hurt. It's, looking back on it, I feel like it was, and now that I have a kid, I don't think I would do that trip.
Yeah, there were a lot of parenting themes in the movie.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn about from
Yeah.
hanging out with those people. And,
Parenting styles, family relationships.
yeah.
Must be different now that you have a kid to watch that and think about some of those things.
Yeah, that's the first time he's seen it, and we just had to send him home because it was late for him. But he was just watching the whole thing. Pretty neat. Yeah.
Oh, no, sorry.
Scratching your nose?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, the woman at the end,
Yeah.
when she said that, and I mean, I think you express yourself in a great way, but, when she said that, not so much with words, but with your fingers, I mean, do you feel that sometimes?
Well, I don't speak French, right? So.
But I guess I'm just wondering if, because you play so much, I mean, do you feel like that's how you express your emotion, or,
Probably.
Mhm.
I might be better at it now than I was then.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, thanks.
Did you happen to have a what I would call a musical conversation where you really didn't speak the same language, but when she started playing, the conversation just happened? Like the linguistic barriers came down, but the music came up, and then it was a language, it was conversation at that point.
Did that happen?
Yes.
Yeah, it happened constantly. In fact, for people who didn't hear the question, he's asking me if there were times when we just couldn't communicate at all, but then we started playing and everything would just happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that happened. And part of why I did this in the first place, I knew this was going to work. I knew it would be a really special thing because In the 80s, when I was in a band called Newgrass Revival, we got these State Department tours where we would go to Egypt and Bangladesh and India and spend like 6 weeks traveling in these fairly remote areas. And because we had sort of an ambassador status as performers, I would always wire ahead and say, I want to play with musicians, I want to hear local music. And so they would go get somebody, and I would get to meet some local musicians and play with them. And inevitably, they'd be like, why am I here? You know, and then they'd get out their instrument and play, and then I'd start playing, and we'd find some common ground, and all of a sudden, everybody'd get real happy, like crazy happy. And it happened to every single place we went, and it was just something about, well, first of all, just as I like to listen, and I like to see if I can find a way to fit into things. That's one of the things I just like to do as a musician. It's not a technical skill, it's just sort of a morphing in kind of thing. And it makes people feel good when you make that effort, and that's one thing. So anyway, then when the Flecktones got together, we got a tour of the Far East where we went to Mongolia and Singapore, Thailand, Philippines, Indonesia, and we made it a requirement before we even put the tour together that they would find us musicians and they would perform with us in every country. So when we would show up, we would find the musicians and learn one of their songs and bring them out halfway through our show and jam with them. And it was just awesome. You could just feel walls crumbling in everybody's minds as you did it.
Like when you worked with Sandy Berman and Kangurel Andar.
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, it's happened with almost everybody that I've worked with from different cultures. So, and this came much later than all of those things, so I already knew there was no reason why it shouldn't work. But that seemed to happen everywhere. That was the reason to do it. So, yeah, hi.
Hi. My favorite song in the film is Jorlin.
Jorlin, yeah.
And you and Sangare seem to have really great chemistry. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the experience of working with her.
Sure. Now you can see that we already knew each other when we met at the airport, right? She's like, hey, and I'm like, hey. So how that happened was, are you guys? Are you in a hurry? I'll tell you a little about. This is funny. Part of how this whole trip came about, aside from falling in love with African music and the banjo's history to it, and I always wanted to go to Africa and hear the music and find the acoustic musicians. I knew they had to be there. But anyway, when Jeff Coffin was in the Flecktones, he's a saxophone player. He used to always be listening to all kinds of music in the back of the bus, and we'd finish a show, and I'd talk to the audience, and then I'd get back on the bus. And just one day, I got back in the bus, and this music was playing in the back off his little miniature stereo, and it was like, it just blew me away. I was like, what is that? And it was Umo Sangare, right? It was her music. And so I was like, wow, that is like, I can relate to that music so well. It just sounds like it could be, it's not bluegrass, but it's so connected to, I mean, banjo would fit in there like a glove. I just remember thinking that. And it became my favorite record to put on. If people came over for a party to hang out, I'd put on Umo Sangare. What is that? That's Umo Sangare. And it was just my go-to personal favorite. And then I discovered by a fluke that the person who booked her in the United States was a guy named Paul Kahn, who I used to be in a band called Tasty Licks with in 1976. He was a bass player, but his wife didn't want him to go on the road, so he decided to become our booking agent. And the band fell apart, but he became a very successful booking agent. Well, it turns out Umu Sangare is booked by him, and I found out by doing a little research that she was going to be in the country and was performing. And so I got in touch with Paul, and he got me in touch with her, and we had a little conversation. And I said, well, I'm a banjo player, and I really want to go to Mali someday. I would love to play with you. And she was okay. She was nice, but it was like, I don't know. So I said, Paul, what can I do? He said, well, I think she's still here. I said, I think that she's in Brooklyn somewhere. She's got some friends, and she's like staying in Brooklyn for a few weeks. So I just I went up to Brooklyn. I live in Nashville. I went up to Brooklyn, and I got my brother, who at that time still lived in New York City, and we asked if we could come over and say hello. And so she allowed us to do that, and we came over, and I remember my brother had his camera, and she was like, she wouldn't let him film anything. And we just talked a little bit. That's the only time I'd ever met her. And her musicians were there, and I don't even think we jammed. Yeah, maybe I had my banjo and we jammed a little bit. And I showed her a little bit of a Flecktones video. She was really into watching videos. And that was it. And I said, well, I'd love to come there one day. And she said, well, if you come, you'll stay at my hotel. And we'll take care of you. And then that's what happened. So, yeah. So that Jorlin is one of her songs that she had done. There's a couple of different versions of. And I just imagined a different version of it.
Had you imagined that other version before you played with her?
Yeah, I kind of got there with it in mind, because I heard the song and I heard it a different way. I heard it more as a melodic song. I think she had a beat on her version, but there's a couple of versions she has. Yeah, and in fact, my wife Abby's the one who said, "Wow, you should do Jorlin with her," and I hadn't even tuned into that one. I was thinking of all the groovy ones with the beats at that time. You know. So, yeah, she's great.
So, how long ago was this? Was this before you met Abigail?
No, I think we'd known each other for a couple of years, because I had this huge satellite phone that I took with me over there that was like this big, and I could actually pick up the phone from Uganda and dial it and reach Abby and hold it up to the big marimba and say, hey, check this out, you know, about what I'm hearing. So I think we were maybe a couple of years in at that point. So it's been probably 10 years. Was it 76? No, not 76. Was it 2007 or 6? I'm not even sure anymore. It's been a while. Yeah.
The first time that I watched this movie, before watching it, seeing the title "Throw It on Your Heart," I had such a resonant connection of thinking of being in a picking circle and, you know, like, throw it on your heart, put it in, and then upon watching this film and where that comes from,
Yeah.
carries such a weight and such a heaviness, and then upon learning more about the history of this instrument and the weight that it carries, I'm just curious why you chose that as the title for this, for that beautiful song that's, it's not quite as, like, intense and dark. I'm just curious what that means for you, because when they throw it on your heart, it's like, let go, like, say goodbye to your heart because you're going into the ocean now.
Yeah, it's not what you think.
Yeah.
I mean, I like titles that are that allow the audience to have various interpretations. And so Throw Down Your Heart works in a lot of different ways. You know, it could be like, well, throw down your heart for this great African music, throw down your heart for the banjo. It could be a lot of things, just the words. And then when you find out what it really is, it's deeply connected to slavery. And the banjo wouldn't be here if it wasn't for slavery. You know, it's got this connection to, it's a big part of the history of the banjo. So it just resonated with me. It just sounded like the title. Once I heard it, I was like, oh, wow. So, okay, I think that I'm feeling like we're done, unless anybody has anything else.
Everyone, thank
Thanks,
you
guys.
so much.
Thank you.
Woo!
Bela Fleck and Abigail Washburn will be playing at Armstrong on Tuesday. It's sold out. Maybe there's some on the